Hey everyone, welcome back to Crypto Cash. Thank you so much again for joining me here. Hope you're having a phenomenal day. We're taking a quick look here, of course, at the crypto market update. Before we do, I just want to say thank you again so much for being an amazing part of my life. We got almost 100 subscribers off our video from yesterday. That is super impressive. It's all because you always hit the like button, comment below, and just keep interacting. Really deeply appreciate that. And thank you again. And obviously, you're welcome. We'll keep the content flowing. We're going to look here at the weekly time frame, just kind of get some perspective on the macro here for Bitcoin, and also the 3-day transitional time frame here for the macro, essentially with our Gaussian channel here, effectively retesting that upper band, which is generally a good sign. Ethereum also absorbing majority of the market cap. We're seeing a lot of divergence here with Bitcoin and Ethereum, kind of like the combination between the two. I'll explain more there too. Furthermore, CME gaps obviously here for Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Solana, and back in liquidation data that's fairly telling here for Ethereum, likely to continue further higher here with this significant amount of short liquidations. So awesome stuff. We're going to check it all out. Be sure to stick around. Let's take a look. All right, folks, before we jump into this juicy data here and talk a bit more about why I feel we're going to see a big move this week, we want to discuss just quickly what your thoughts are on this week's price action. Are you bullish or are you bearish? Well, crypto Twitter here so far says that we're bullish, bottom is in. Roughly 50% of you think that. When we look at YouTube, we can see a very similar scenario here. Basically off twice as many votes, of course, on YouTube, we can see 52% of you are bullish and thinking the bottom is in. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. Keep in mind this is a weekend. Price action is a little funky. We're seeing some pretty significant liquidations here. A lot of them are Ethereum and Bitcoin related, the largest positions, of course. And why don't we just talk about this right now here? The elephant in the room, or the whale in the room, if you will. We can see 30 million 24-hour short liquidations versus only 8 million for Ethereum. So Ethereum, it's such a significant divergence there. There's so much more shorts getting liquidated than longs. It tells me that there's a lot of strength in Ethereum. Okay. Now you could argue the same thing with other coins too. Solana has a 3-to-1 ratio. Bitcoin's close to break even, if you will. So for the most part, people are trading Ethereum, Solana as far as like the most significant amount of volume is concerned, and we're seeing the most amount of liquidations. Good news is we have longs back in the green here for Ethereum and Solana. So if you took those trades here a couple days ago with me, then maybe consider adjusting your stop loss higher just to be safer, because we never truly know what's going to happen. Let's take a look at the weekly time frame here for Bitcoin. Kind of recognize that we've got a lot of confirming factors. In other words, we have our local high here of 109,000. We're soon to close right there at that level. Obviously, the candlestick hasn't closed yet. We're getting close, but at this point, the key takeaway is that we're maintaining above the 20-day SMA, our super trend indicator, and as well the 50-day SMA too. So while we do have a pretty significant divergence, keep in mind this is a divergence that started ever since March of 2024. This is a weekly time frame. It's a very slow type of moving average, if you will, but overall, the concept here remains the same. We're still in decent shape here, even though we are pulling back. It doesn't mean that we can't still pull back further. It just implies that we're seeing some support starting to pile up below the price action. Taking a look here at the 3-day time frame for our Gaussian channel, essentially, this is a good indication in a lot of cases where when we stay above or we retest this level here, this upper band, there's more continuation, more confluence potential for the price to bounce off that level. I feel like that's a pretty safe estimate, because we do have a lot of support with our previous 3-day candlestick closures at 106K, and once more that confirming confluence on the weekly time frame here that we just looked at. So overall, I really like what I'm seeing here so far. Does this mean we're just gonna shoot straight up here? No, definitely not. I always have to kind of mention that in my videos, because some people they get the wrong impression here. But while we are diverging, what we're going to be looking for here over the next couple of weeks rather, is just mainly to ensure that we are not going any further down here with our oscillators, or more importantly, there's a histogram, because the more momentum you have, the more likely of a hood of further downside. So there's no doubt at this point here that the rising wedge and the triple top, if you will, on stochastic RSI have all played out, and the price is pulling back as expected. We had kind of a weak top there at 124. So hindsight's 2020. Definitely not telling you that I was perfect in my call to the downside, but I have been mentioning to be very careful in this descending trend and to wait for the descending trend line to be broken. We still haven't officially done that yet, so I think it's important for for us to kind of make sure not to get too ahead of ourselves. Speaking of ahead of ourselves, Ethereum, here's kind of the concept. We can see Bitcoin dominance pulling back, which is generally a good sign for altcoins. However, altcoins are stalling out. Main reason why, Ethereum's absorbing all the market capitalization, and we can see a lot of money still flowing into stablecoin. So all those things combined tells us that we're in a kind of a holding pattern. Bitcoin, if it continues to go sideways here, we'll see money coming away from Ethereum, performing itself into stablecoin and altcoins, and we should see a continuation higher for the alts. Let's take a look here though at the back end data and kind of recognize when we talk about the overall scenario here, with I just say the crypto market overview, the fear and greed index is good. We're still in that fearish type of scenario, which once more, that's generally when you want to buy, because right now the whales are pushing the price action in the direction. Everyone's starting to get scared. So people start to sell now. As soon as you start to sell, they start to buy. That's kind of what's going on. And we'll look in the, I'll show you some top trader dynamics here soon on the back end that actually tells us that we're seeing some good strength in this lower range here. Furthermore, though, just to kind of clarify, we can see a negative ETF outflow. Generally speaking, we only see 2 or 3 days worth of this continuation before the price recovers. Every time these dips are pulled back, we see the price action recover and bounce. 18th was a pretty significant correction, and we saw the price recover. Even though it was somewhat of a dead cat bounce, it still recovered to retest that descending trend. Overall here, if we look though, with this negative ETF outflow, that was 3 days ago, keep in mind. So weekend data doesn't really factor in right now. So for the most part at this point, we're kind of flying blind there. But for the truth is, historically, we see natural ebbs and flows in this regard, and this is nothing to be concerned with. What I want to show you here, though, is the average top trader for the deltas here based on liquidation and or just long versus short positions. So take a look here. We can see long positions are starting to increase and short positions are starting to decrease, which obviously tells us we're moving up for the time being. Keep in mind, this is a 24-hour time frame here. So it doesn't necessarily tell us that we're like in a perfect place or the price is going to shoot straight up. What does tell us though, firm indications that we are starting to bottom out is as volume starts to increase with the average top trader, we can recognize that the price action is more likely to pivot and bounce from here. So this to me is a very important indication to look for, because as you can see, when the price continues to pull back, so the price is pulling back here, we're starting to see increased amount of volume, okay? And that's generally a good sign. And if we look here too as well, this is basically the open interest delta for institutional traders, whale traders, and essentially just retail. Retail is this here. This is basically you and I. And this is the small fish here, the chum in the waters. We can see volume is increasing. Open interest is at a high right now because the price is pulling back. Furthermore, though, institutional traders, they're slowly increasing. So throughout this last week, we saw a lot more volume and activity than we did the week prior. So that tells us more strength as the bottom continues lower. And also take a look here. We can see whale data here. Whale traders are starting to get a little more active here, right? So we're starting to see open interest going up with that kind of shift or that dynamic. So while these are not like exact sciences here, but after looking at these things for years on end, I can tell you that generally speaking, when volume increases as the price goes down and we start to retest our previous highs as new lows, the likelihood of continuation higher is greater. So while we still haven't broken our descending trend line yet, we're starting to see some nice bottoming potential here for Bitcoin. Let's take a look here at open interest really quick, just locally, and recognize that 109,000 rounding up a little bit rather. It's more like 108.5, 108.6. We see a lot of open interest there locally. So obviously people are interested in buying this dip here. And we can recognize too, as well, when we look at short liquidation delta, it's still high. So there's more people shorting this coin than taking longs at this moment. So the overall trend is still down. I need to reinforce that and tell you that multiple times so you get it through your head that we haven't broken bullish at all right? But we do have some early signs of bottoming out, which to me is important. And if we look at liquidation too here, this last, 7 days here, we can see there's just a small chunk of liquidation down below at about 106 to 107 roughly. Okay, so that's not really a super significant large amount. We do have a lot more above the price action, but locally here, you can see that most longs and shorts have gotten pretty well hammered in last, basically last week's worth of trading. Okay, so that's kind of what we're looking at there. Another thing I like to see here, of course, is the open interest delta is increasing. Generally speaking, the higher the open interest, the more likelihood of further upside. That's the easy way to understand it. And we want to see true retail longs, that percentage drop with it. So hopefully we can see that continue to shift its dynamic. All right, so that's kind of where we're at in the back end here. We've already looked at most things here on Bitcoin, but just to jump into the daily, to recognize this, there is a fair value gap upwards of 111,000. That's close to our local bottom. We had that 110, 112K support range, so to speak, for about 3 or 4 days. Then we inevitably lost that. So once more, most things are bearish here. There's nothing that's like super telling is that we're just going to shoot straight up from here. Okay. Again, the charts are not telling us phenomenal situations. We're not in a position where it's like, yeah, we got some hidden bullish convergence or something like that. I think the larger time frames are telling us we're starting to see that local bottom potential with that previous high as a new low. Back end data with whale traders and or large balance traders, those are essentially a very good sign. And open interest delta is looking better too. So those things to me factor in, letting me know that we're probably in a much better shape. We're also seeing this 0.618 fib level here. This once again is the macro fibs based on the local low to the local high. Well, keep in mind this goes all the way back to June. But for these fib levels here, we can see this 0.618 fib level is so far holding well. And we do have some decent volume in there previously before we broke that 108K range. So once more, those are all positive signs. 4-hour time frame, nothing super awesome here, honestly. We do have bullish convergence a little bit on the RSI, but we've talked about that previously. Generally speaking, if you see RSI increasing and the price decreasing, you're starting to see more buying pressure. And that's what we're seeing there. So besides the obvious, that's kind of where we're at there for Bitcoin. Hopefully that makes sense to you. Why don't you comment below? Let me know what your thoughts are on that analysis. Love to hear it. If you're looking for a new exchange or possibly just want to help support the channel, BitUnix has got you covered. We've been partnered with this exchange for over 2 years. It's been our fan favorite for our community, and the reason why is because they take really good care of you. They offer trading reward bonuses as well as a reduction in fees. Best exchange I would recommend at this point. Link down below for more information. All right, let's move on to Ethereum, see what's going on here, and just double check a couple of things. So let's start with the backend data, kind of see open interest for Ethereum has always been pretty heavy, okay? I mentioned previously 4,400 is probably the heaviest concentration, but we got this $4,500 potential resistance for us. So expect some resistance, but we're starting to create a bullish type of pennant or flag pattern here in the ascending type of trend that we're in right now. So this little channel looks like a very bullish channel here, and we'll talk more about that here in a minute. But the key takeaway is that 4,400 is that significant amount of support, as well as 4,300 previously to that, right? So that's why I felt comfortable averaging in at 45, 44, and 4,300 for Ethereum, okay? So I think our average position is right in the 4,400 range. So we're once again back in profit on that trade. Same thing with Solana, which we'll look at here next, but I want to talk about liquidation short delta and the fact that this is dissipating. As you start to see this breaking even, coming closer to a head, that shows a shift in momentum. So it's a very, very good sign. If we look here as well, more liquidation above the price more immediately than below. Super significant amount of liquidation at 46 to 4,800. So shorts are going to have a really bad day here if Bitcoin starts to just slowly continue higher and Ethereum continues to liquidate those shorts, and we're going to see a massive short squeeze. So I'm really still very bullish on Ethereum, partially because we have a significantly large ETF inflow, but also the overall sense here is that majority of everything we see on the charts is looking pretty strong. When we look at the daily time frame for Ethereum, we can recognize that we are, yes, under the 20-day SMA, but for the most part, we're still maintaining above 50 in the RSI. We're soon to see a second or perhaps even a tertiary stochastic swing to the upside. And money flow index is right there at 50, or sorry, above 50 rather, which is generally a good sign as well. So these are all little signs I like to look for when I consider a trade. Furthermore, too, if we look at the 4-hour time frame, we can recognize we have broken our short-term descending trend. Now, we haven't broken above all moving averages. We still got a little bit of fair value below us, but outside of these little outliers here, we are looking like we are shifting that dynamic, okay? We're essentially establishing higher highs and higher lows. Those are things you want to look for. But we do look here, of course, at 45.50 as a close approximate. There is that point of control here. For the most part here locally, the most amount of volume we see for Ethereum is at 45.50 if you exclude the local bottom here at 4,300, okay? So it really just reinforces that 4,500 to 4,600 will be that resistance shelf for us. But once more, we're starting to print a nice little pattern here. And generally speaking, when you see this kind of pattern, they do continue a lot higher up, okay? Now, once more, patterns are subjective, okay? You can kind of create a pattern in any shape or form if you look for it, right? If you look hard enough. But what I'm getting at here is we're seeing higher highs. You could actually probably argue these are more so parallel highs and then higher lows, which is equally just as good because that's a triangle pattern, and that does essentially break to the upside because you're consistently retesting the same level while bears are slowly losing control with a higher low pattern. So those are good signs. These are all things that usually break to the upside. So still bullish on Ethereum. That's the takeaway there. All right, let's go ahead and move on to Solana. So moving on to Solana, Let's double check some important factors here, first of all, and recognize with Solana, the backend data. Let's go ahead and start with that first, because Solana is one of those unique coins right now. It's still very bullish above the $200 range. I haven't officially lost that. We wicked down, yes, to that 198 range, but great thing about that is that helped us average into our position too. I think we're averaged in at 203 on Solana, if I'm not mistaken. Having said that, though, tons of open interest in the current range. Normally, I don't love open interest above the price, but I can tell you in this instance here, it's actually a good sign showing that there's a lot of interest in buying a Solana in the 200 plus range. However, you got to keep in mind as we continue higher, exit liquidity will continue, and we'll start seeing people selling more so than buying, just based on the simple fact that they're trying to get out of their upside down positions. That's standard. But liquidation short delta is still at 3 billion. We're still bearish here on this coin, the overall sense, but it's going to be hard pressed to find any kind of coin right now that has a good liquidation delta for the upside. But once more, that just kind of reinforces short squeeze potential. We also have more potential there too with this 207 to 210 liquidation range here, close to the price action. I think we're probably going to continue higher up because of that. And we do take a look at the charts here. This is, once again, I don't recommend trading solely on patterns, but we're seeing a lot of bullish type of structured patterns here that are essentially soon to break out and or have broken out. Okay, so we got this little continuation here. Even though it is, yes, lower high and lower lows, it's consolidating nicely at our point of control at 205. If you recall correctly from before, if I recall correctly, 205 has been that point of control for us, or just more importantly, that support range for us here. So we're going to see if that holds. But once more, there's still resistance above us. So let's not get too crazy out of control here with the long position at what kind of feels like the top. But we're right here at that point of control. But the macro perspective here is looking pretty solid. We can see we're above all moving averages. We do have a secondary stochastic swing to the downside. The second does carry more weight than the first, just basically emphasizing that it's going to be harder to break out to the upside. We're probably going to range bound first before we break a little bit higher. So I would expect the price to maybe go more sideways and up versus just straight up. Okay. The only thing that would cause Solana to go straight up is if Bitcoin went to 116 or 114, somewhere in that range here or higher. Okay, so all that being said, if we take a look here at the overall sense for Solana, 4-hour time frame is still looking quite bullish. We are above and below those key levels here for the moving averages, but we also look at the RSI. We're over 50. Money flow index is increasing. We had that second swing here to the upside when we bottomed out there locally. There's a lot of convergence here, kind of letting us know that this momentous shift is likely to continue higher. So just keep that in mind, but I don't want you to be, blindly bullish, because of course there are some, caveats here. We are in a unique channel. Oftentimes these type of channels here, they do break to the downside. They're bearish rectangles, but there's not a ton of signs here indicating that's the case. However, that is still, once again, a pattern, and the odds are higher that could happen, right? But we've looked at everything else. Everything else combined makes us believe, or makes me believe, of course, you think what you want, that we're slightly more bullish than bearish on Solana, and that to me is a positive. All right, let's move on to SUI. See what's going on with this guy here. I can save you some time. We're probably not going to spend too much time on SUI. Touch on some key points here, but it's still very bearish. Okay, and I'll explain why I believe that and I feel that, and I've been talking about this coin being bearish for quite a while. Now, granted, I didn't take any short positions with it recently because I don't feel like we should take a short at this level. I just think it's too high of risk with how quickly the market can recover, and this coin does very well. But the overall sense is that it's still a very bearish coin. Let's talk about it. 350 is that point of reference there, and 340. Those are the two areas of resistance above based on open interest. Short liquidation delta is still high, and we can see here as well that liquidation, while present above and below, is closer. Larger amounts are below the price at 315. More specifically, 310 to 320 is probably the next target area. So if we do see 310 to 320 swept, or just say we see somewhere in the 310 range, that's going to be our golden pocket, our 0.618 fib range. And that would be an area of interest for me, not because of just that one fib level, but because we're entering that psychological support of that $3. Okay. So daily time frame, we'll look at this here. It's easier to see on the 4-hour, but we are still in a descending trend. We've retested this lower high pattern 3 going on 4 times now. Okay, we've got our point of control at 350. That's a heavy resistance for us here locally. So if we do see 350, I would lean a little bit more towards it, considering a short. However, that would also break our descending trend, so that may be an invalidation. But between now and then, that seems like a practical consideration. We do see some convergences here, a little bit of RSI convergence, but that doesn't mean too much. What's important here is that money flow index is increasing. So that implies that volume is flowing into this coin as the price comes to a lower price point, i.e. more affordable, more interest at this lower range. So with the money flow being above the RSI, that's generally a favorable sign. But it can also be a very false positive on a weekend because volume is weird on weekends. So half the reason why I don't love trading weekends. And this is a 3-day weekend too. We get one extra day of this awesome, stupid volume. So that's kind of where we're at. As you can see, not much to really report here. We're still, until we get above this descending trend line, I'm not going to be remotely considering a long position with this coin. That's kind of where we're at. All right, moving on to XRP. Let's take a look here. So XRP back in data is as follows. We can see 315 and 330 are those significant areas of resistance there based on open interest. Short liquidation delta remains super high for this coin. In fact, very few coins are this bearish as far as liquidation is concerned. Keep in mind this coin is highly manipulated by those of us who are not us. That makes sense, right? Whoever's watching this video is not somebody that's going to be, part of that dynamic. So what I'm getting at here is a simple way to understand it is whales are they're suppressing the price of XRP quite significantly, and they're trying to get better value so they can average into their position. So whenever this coin takes off, they can have a really good big bag, right? I mean, everyone wants that, don't get me wrong, but you can see it pretty obvious here with the liquidation. And we look at the open interest and combine that with this liquidation, 270 to 275. It seems like a very sensible place to see the price action hit again. Now, I'm only saying that because the way that the price action is moving here, if you look at this and you compare it with Bitcoin, it's underwhelming. Like you look at Bitcoin's chart here, you can see we are seeing higher lows and an attempt at a higher high. XRP, while it does have a higher high, it's retesting its local low. So it's pulling back harder than Bitcoin is when it retraces. And it's also not moving up quite as fast as Bitcoin either, even though Bitcoin's pretty much stuck on stupid too. The whole point we mentioned that is that the correlation between Bitcoin and XRP is still quite present, right? So until that correlation becomes less familiar or consistent, we're going to presume that Bitcoin's going to XRP is going to respond how Bitcoin does. So between now and then, at this point, Bitcoin hasn't broken its descending trend. We haven't seen the same thing for XRP. So it really isn't much to note here, except for the fact that we do have some support at 275. We've retested that level a couple of times now. So that is our last line of defense. There's a pretty significant gap between there and now. So 260, if we do lose 275, would be the next potential area of consideration for a long and or just an area of consideration for a short target, okay? Based on that being a previous high. All right, so just some food for thought there, folks. That's all there is to it. All right, that's kind of what we got there. I hope you learned something today. Thanks so much again for being an awesome part of my life. Really appreciate it. Don't forget to like the video, comment below. Let's see if we can get this video higher on the charts than yesterday. See if we can get more subscribers too. So appreciate y'all. Thanks for being wonderful people, and we'll look forward to seeing the next one. Take care of yourself out there. Bye-bye.